Hello, welcome to another episode of Quarantine with Craig. I am Craig, and today we are talking about fonts. In fact, I've called this Fix Yo Damn Fonts, or something like that. And by the way, I couldn't find a picture of Mr. T that was transparent, that had a transparent background on it, so you could see it like this. So I just found a t-shirt and plonked that in instead. So we're talking about fonts. Fonts. It's one of the biggest bugbears of mine as a designer. It's one of the biggest bugbears of mine that I see clients doing wrong. It's one of just one of my most annoying things in the world when people get fonts wrong. And today we're going to spend about 5 or 6 minutes on fonts, and I'm going to teach you the simplest ways to get fonts right. So first of all, this is a really good article by Oliver Richtenstein, and I hope I've said his name right, I won't be repeating it. I've linked this article for you, go read it and go check it out. It's really good and it helps you get your fonts right without even watching the rest of this video. So if you don't want to see me, go read that. The alternate title for this episode was really obvious shit you can improve on your website right now. Fix Yo Damn Fonts. That's got a bit more of a ring to it, but I kind of didn't want to call it that. So let's start with just this thing right here. The biggest thing I see people make in terms of font mistakes or just text mistakes on websites particularly is that the background is just illegible. They'll pick a background that looks nice as design and then they'll put another font on top of it and then you won't be able to read any of it. It's just really annoying. You can't read it. And if you can't read the text that's on a website, why is the text even there? Answer me that. So make sure your background has got a big enough contrast between the text. A black on white is okay, which we'll get to in a little while, but it's not the best, and there's other ways to improve it. But please, because I've said don't do this bit, don't do this. This is way worse. Don't put images behind your text. As I said, you want people to read your text. It's kind of the point of your website. When you put images behind it, or if you put watermarks behind it, which is just the biggest bugbear of mine when it comes to web design, don't put images behind text, please. Just don't do that. So now we're getting somewhere. This is improving a little bit. Now we have got black on white. Generally, when you're looking at contrast between text and the background, you want it to be quite a high contrast, because if the contrast isn't high and it's a little bit like this example where it's on a grey on a white, people with visual impairments might have difficulty reading your text on your website, and also people who are colorblind. There's certain color clashes that don't work for them too, so make sure you have quite a big contrast between your text and the background. Obviously it wants to either be light on dark or dark on light. This example here is 100% black on 100% white, and actually this isn't the most perfect contrast you can get because there's too much contrast. If you've got an old monitor or an old resolution screen, and yes, by the way, people still do have old screens, you can, when you're scrolling around a website, it can be really difficult to actually read the content when the content is pure black on pure white. It makes the text flicker when you're scrolling up and down, so I'd suggest avoiding that. There's a subtle colour change that's going to go between these two slides now. So this is the black on white, and this is the grey on white. This is better. This grey that I've used here is around 333 hexadecimal colour, and yes, I know my hex colours because I'm a designer. Look how cool I am. Yeah, so it's a good idea to use probably this kind of contrast. A grey on a white is a really good option because it's not as harsh on your eyes. One of the things we're trying to do when we're improving the fonts on our website, we're improving the text, when we're trying to make the website more readable, that is the point of this whole exercise. We want to make it so it's comfortable on people's eyes. If you're writing long blog posts or long articles or something like that, it can be really tiring on people's eyes if the text is difficult to read and they just won't finish the article. So our goal with all these text amends is to try and make the text as readable and as comfortable as possible. So that kind of leaves the colour and the background stuff behind. The next thing we should look at is the actual damn font choices. Obviously I was using Comic Sans there, and I was using the other font which I use for all my brand, which is a font called Sango, which is a reverse italicized font, which is terrible for legibility. So don't use those fonts, by the way. Do as I say, not as I do. A better font choice is this one. This is a free font called Inter, so I-N-T-E-R, Inter. It's been all nicely designed and perfect for legibility on the internet. There's a ton of different weights for it, so there's very, very bold fonts and very light fonts. I'm using one of the boldest fonts here and one of the lightest fonts in this example. It's a really flexible font. I recommend using this one. It works for all kinds of stuff, and it's a modern font. You could even go a little bit further with this and improve it a little bit more by not capitalizing all your text. So the difference between those two slides there is that the first slide where it says fix your damn fonts is all capitalized, all caps, and the second one is what's called title case, where the first letter of each word is capitalized. That has a massive impact on readability and especially titles and legibility, so I'd recommend, if you've got long titles particularly, not using all caps, maybe using title case, and actually the better choice is the example above where I've got really obvious written. That's the best type, which is just sentence case. It's much easier for people to read because actually the up and downs in fonts, so the kind of that bit that's, the wiggly bits that go on in a sentence is how we actually read a sentence. So if we lose those by doing that, by making the font all caps, it's much more difficult to read, makes our eyes tired again, makes our minds tired, makes us not want to carry on reading the text, and they'll probably just leave your website. Fix your damn line length. This is one of the first things that really bugs me when I look at anybody's content on a website. It's usually called line length on the internet, but it's also called measure in old school graphic design words, the words like I like using, so it makes me feel cool and I can talk to designers who are really old. So the thing is called line length. Wikipedia kills me with this. Every time you look at Wikipedia, it's a little bit like going like this. It's a little bit like your head is on the top of a typewriter and you're reading it like this. You've got to read it like that to be able to read an entire sentence. It's really, really annoying. So don't do what Wikipedia are doing. Do this, not this. So don't do what Wikipedia are doing. Don't have your text like this. This text is way too wide. This line length on this is way too long. Again, it's making people tired when they're trying to read your content. The best thing to do is to do this. So we've gone from this to this. This now is sticking more to a limit that I tend to stick to. The kind of general rule for this, the rule of thumb, is 45 to 90 characters per line. I find characters a little bit difficult to work out. I prefer to do it in words. So in a pinch, I can actually sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and actually count the words on a line. It's not as accurate as using the characters because obviously words can be different lengths, but generally what I've found over the years from marking up loads of text in all kinds of different mediums, from print to web for apps and stuff like that, 11 words to 15 words per line is a good limit, and it's kind of easy to read when we're in that kind of limit. We could maybe push it right up to 20 words, but you've got to consider what looks right here and not always just the hard and fast rules. So we've got to maybe just take our eyes to this and actually look at it and see if it looks okay. This is an experience thing as well, but you can't go far wrong with 15 words per line. Let's look at font size. Font size is one of those things, and by the way, go back to Oliver's article again and read this article. He talks about font size a bunch in that article. Font size is a thing that people tend to make smaller than it actually needs to be, especially if you're young, especially if you're hip, especially if you're cool, especially if you're using an iPhone. People like to make fonts very, very small. Don't make your fonts small. It makes things very hard to read. Most people do not have good eyes. It's only young people who've got good eyes. Young people don't make up the majority of the people in the world, so make sure it's easy to read by making the fonts bigger. In fact, probably much bigger than they actually are. 16 pixels is generally the rule of thumb. That is the default in a web browser. If you were to go away and make a website, 16 pixels is the default size. Generally stick to that. Don't make it smaller just because it looks nicer. Might look nicer, but no one will read your content. Which one do you want? People to read your content, or people to go, ooh, that's some nice text? Line height or leading. Leading is again the old school designer term that people like me use to make myself look cool in front of older designers. So line height is the space between the lines, basically, the space between each sentence on each line. If we look at this example that I've done here, I've taken the example from the previous page and improved the line height. I generally go for about 145% line height, but this is again something that's quite flexible. if what we're trying to do with increasing the line height is basically just giving each sentence, or well, each line actually, not each sentence, giving each line a little bit of breathing space so it's a little bit easier for us to read and it doesn't make our eyes tired. So 145% is a good figure, that's a good size. Go for 145% and you can't really go very wrong. You could probably push it down to 130, but the 130 to 145% area is the area where it's going to be much easier for people to read and you'll get good results from that. White space, white space, white space. This is the thing, as a designer, clients hate white space. So clients want you to do a design like this. They want no white space around the design whatsoever because clients often call white space wasted space. It couldn't be further from the truth. The more you increase white space in a design, the more the design is suddenly much more legible. Which one would you pick? The first one that's all tight and really difficult to read, the second one which is a little bit better, or the third one where there's just a very clear definition of what you want somebody to read on that page. You can't put too much white space around a design, around some text. You've got to make it comfortable for people to read because you might be writing long blog posts or you might be expecting a lot from your users. So make it comfortable to read, increase the white space, and increase it by a lot. Finally, let's have a quick recap. Number 1, don't use all caps all the time. They're quite difficult to read. Number 2, don't put backgrounds behind your text ever. Please don't ever do that. The grey hexadecimal 333 is generally a good rule. Use that instead of black, especially if you've got a white background. Use good fonts. Don't use Comic Sans. Use something like Inter, which is a nice free font that you can go download on the internet. Look at around 11 to 15 words per line, so shrink your text right down so there's 11 to 15 words per line. Think about when you're reading a book. Try and match it up to a book because books are obviously designed to be read over a long period. People sit down and read them for hours. So look at a book and think about that. 16 pixels is a good font size. Use that. Don't argue. Don't make it any smaller. 145% line height is a good line height to start with. It'll make some space in between your lines on your text and it'll make it much more legible. And then finally, use more white space. I'm Craig Burgess. You can find more out about me on my website, which is Get Doing Things, or if you use Twitter, go over to Twitter, find me on there. It's Craig Burgess. I'd love to know what you think of this video. Please leave me a comment below. Let me know if you want me to cover any other kind of design or marketing or content tips, and I'll be back with another video, maybe a little bit like this one, tomorrow. I'll see you then. Thank you very much. Fix your damn fonts or something like that.